Hey guys, Evan Rock here, back in another video, and today we're going to be doing a review on the Mego 8-inch Ultraman figure. Now, to those of you who have been fans for my channel from the very beginning, you would know that Godzilla was actually not the very first thing that I started off with this channel. It was actually Mego dolls and rubber ducks and stuff like that. And Mego dolls were a company that was around the 1970s. Now they are privately owned by Diamond Select. And they produce these kinds of figures done in this style. And I never reviewed my Mego figures because there are so many of them. That would be a whole other task of its own. And frankly, I don't think because they're not as popular anymore, no one would really watch them. But because I didn't only realize until recently that they made an Ultraman Mego doll, I figured this would make a pretty neat exception to actually make a review on a Mego doll. And again, this being the Mego Ultraman doll. Something I did not even know existed once again until maybe like half a year ago or something like that. And then I looked into it before my birthday came around the corner and was like, I should get this. And this is definitely a very cool figure. Since we're already in the phase of the pros, I might as well start off with the first one. And I have to say that my favorite pro about this figure has to be the articulation. The articulation on this is really well done. It's very similar to the last two figures I reviewed, in which they're kind of in between the amount of articulation joints that a NECA or a Bandai would have. We can see this is prevalent in many areas, like here in the arms, legs here, the head. And yeah, you get the idea. This would be something that I think would be very good for articulation. Once again, I would like to say it's in between a Bandai and a NECA. So let's get into the next thing I like about this figure. The next thing I like about this figure is the paint job. Now, the paint job on this figure is really well done. There aren't many examples of booming colors. I mean, the cloth that is his clothing pretty much isn't exactly paint. It's just the material was made and sewed in red, so I wouldn't count that as paint. But we do see paint, of course, on his face, and I'd like to say that this golden eye color is really nice. And I think the paint job is just on the average line. I think the articulation is above average. This is just on the average line. So let's get into the next thing I like about this figure. The next thing I like about this figure is the detail. The detail on this figure is also right above average. It's very close to being slightly below average, and that's because there's not many noticeable things to say about the detail. Once again, most of this figure is covered up with cloth to resemble its clothing, which is pretty cool and all, but in terms of actual detail on the actual body sculpture, we don't get much of it. Of course, the facial detail is the best example of detail, and once again, it is what makes it pretty average, because we have nice detail here on his ears, if you even call those ears. I don't know if they're really ears. Or his mouth here, his eyes, of course this area that goes around and makes, Ultraman. So again, lots of resembling features that makes Ultraman very well known for his design are really well interpreted in the detail of this figure. Of course, most of it isn't exactly detailed because it's mostly cloth to cover up his clothing. And I also think this is a pretty cool detail right here. We have this see-through, his timer, of course, that gives him the ability to only be a kaiju for a certain amount of time. So as for the cons of this figure, we have some good cons in here, a good amount of cons, that is. Of course, cons aren't actually good. When it comes to the cons of this figure, there are lots and lots of things to recognize in terms of cons. Most of these are half points, so I guess you could call those nitpicks, but there are plenty of these to mention. The first being is that the figure and the fact that it doesn't stand well is, of course, a fairly big con. Sometimes it stands well, like... Oh, nope, that was an example of it not standing well. The point is that, yes, it can stand, but it's very tricky for it to stand in place. I don't know if that's because of the fact that it's too tall, so it leans over to one side most of the time, which I also think is a separate con of its own. But the fact that its also boots are... they're not really well made, so it causes it to tip over. Another nitpick is the fact that the blue icon, which of course, once I said, is his timer, is kind of coming off here. As you can see, it's becoming a little bit loose, and the glue here wasn't really well pasted. I also think that his face sculpt is kind of weird because it looks like it's slanted to one side, if you can see what I mean there. It's not like it's even, where one side of it is placed and one side of it is not placed on the right angle there. I don't know if it's because the head is leaning towards one side, but I don't know, not really looking good there. So all in all, I would rate this figure an 8.8 out of 10. It is a figure that I definitely recommend you get, especially if you're into Mego collecting, but I'm not sure many of my fans in this channel are. But either way, still recommend you get it because it's Ultraman. Who doesn't like Ultraman? And once again, a very cool figure to have in your collection. Without further ado, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Like, comment, subscribe. See you guys later, and bye-bye.